Katara wasn't sure what to think of the story they had just overheard. She had known there was almost nothing that the Fire Nation was incapable of doing, but it still sounded impossible that the Fire Lord had done that to his own son. I can never look at Prince Zuko the same way again. Not now that I know where he got his scar. Sokka knew they had to keep going, but he also realized that a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn more about their enemies. Prince Zuko, the Fire Nation, the Fire Lord, people and stuff they would have to figure out how to defeat. Before today, we didn't even know the Fire Lord's name, let alone anything about his character or relations. We've already learned important stuff. Horrible, but important. So that's how Prince Zuko got his scar. One of the men gathered around the fire uttered. Yes, Uncle thought. Zuko carries many scars from that day, some more visible than others. No wonder the prince is determined to capture the Avatar. It's the only way he can return to life he used to have, Lieutenant G said thoughtfully. Yes and no, Arrow replied. For a long time, Zuko's desires to go home were his main motivation. However, lately, my nephew has come to the same realization I've known since that fateful Agni Kai, that his life can never go back to the way it used to be, even if he captures the Avatar. Is that why he's been so different of late? Shimanoki's question caught Iroh off guard. The change in Zuko's behavior wasn't caused by any one thing, but Oki's guess was so close to the truth that Uncle didn't want to contradict him. That, among other things, have certainly played a part. Iroh hesitated for a moment, wondering how much he was at liberty to say. Zuko trusts them, Iroh reminded himself. He trusted the crew, that is. The Warrior Tribe siblings, on the other hand. He'll forgive me. Another reason of that change is my nephew's attitude is that Zuko recently learned more about another tragedy from his past. His mother's disappearance 6 years ago. Uncle continued. That is another long and painful story, one I'm not at liberty to share with you today, but that has altered my nephew's outlook on his life and nation forever. I can't believe Zuko has been struggling with all this stuff. His father banishing him, his mother disappearing, but he's never said a word about that to any of us, Juva said, sounding more puzzled than accusing. Like I said, my nephew is a very private person. He has a tendency to carry his problems alone, which I fear has led him to become quite burdened and lonely. However, he has made some significant progress of that front lately, Iroh concluded on a happier note. He got agreeing mumblings and nodding as a response. The crew has noticed this change as well. If you don't mind me asking, G started. Iroh gave him an encouraging look, so the man went on. You said that going home used to be Zuko's number one reason for wanting to capture the Avatar, but that it wasn't anymore. Can I ask what it is then? Iroh smiled at the man. He was grateful the lieutenant had brought up this topic. Uncle would have said something about the matter even if they hadn't asked, because there were certain people present that needed to hear it. But he was happy to know the Water Tribe siblings weren't the only ones in the room who might be curious to learn more about why Zuko was after the Avatar. There are certain uncomfortable truths that Aang and his companions needed to know, but Iroh feared that he said them to Katara and Sokka directly, they would think him a liar. Since the siblings were currently hiding on a ramp above them, they would hear what Iroh had to say and they wouldn't be able to stop him. Trying to open someone's eyes to what the world was like was a tricky task for several reasons. The most prominent being that people heard what they wanted to hear and believed what they wanted to believe. If they were told something that went drastically against what they thought they knew, they would not be ready to hear it. If you wanted to teach someone a lesson they didn't want to hear, you have to ease it on them slowly. I had been doing exactly that on his nephew for years, and now it was time to extend the courtesy to the Water Tribe siblings as well. The children were, after all, in dire need of someone opening their eyes to the fact the world wasn't black and white. Both kids had been brought up to believe the Fire Nation was evil to the core. Therefore, they presumed all Fire Nation people were bad guys with no redeeming qualities. This was a common belief about your enemy in a time of war, especially when the war had lasted for generations, and the belief about your enemy's awfulness had become what people grew up hearing. The only way Zuko or I can ever have a reasonable conversation with the Avatar's little gang, and I had a strong feeling that would soon come a time that was necessary, is if they are willing to hear us out. For that to be possible, the gang had to see their pursuers as human beings. That was why I had gone through the trouble of orchestrating a situation where the Water Tribe siblings were provided with a seeming choice whether to learn more of Zuko's past or not. As Uncle had hoped, they had been unable to resist a chance to hear more about their would-be captor. The lemur had proved been quite useful in convincing the children they had escaped on their own. Ira had contemplated whether it was possible to actually teach Momo how to open locks, but since there wasn't time, he had settled for teaching the lemur to sit tight long enough for it to appear plausible he had opened the lock. The kids had obviously bought into it, probably because they couldn't picture a scenario where the evil captor had let them go on purpose. All in all, everything had gone exactly according to Hywo's plan. He had found the perfect way to tell the crew some long overdue facts about Zuko, and managed to make his nephew look more human in the eyes of his enemy. Speaking of enemies, it was due time Katara and Sokka heard the Fire Nation's point of view on the Avatar. Although Zuko no longer believes he can return to his old life, he is still determined to capture the Avatar, because Zuko believes that the Airbender is a threat to the citizens of the Fire Nation. Aang may be young and fairly innocent now, but his carefree attitude and lack of foresight makes him a dangerous young man. Ira locked eyes with the people sitting around the fire before continuing. It was important that everyone in the room was paying close attention to what he was about to tell them. For their own safety, they needed to stop underestimating Aang. Most people from the other nations have sided with the Avatar, seeing his return as a blessing, but if they believe that the Avatar is only a danger to the Fire Nation, they are gravely mistaken. When people hear the word Avatar, they think about the past Avatars, but that makes them expect too much of Aang. Aang is the Avatar, but he's not a fully realized Avatar, and the distinction is more important than most people realize. Uncle took a short break to emphasize how important this was. The Avatar's training consists of much more than learning 4 bendings. The Avatars of old spent 4 years living in each of the nations, learning not just bending but also about the traditions, beliefs, and worldviews of each nation. Only a fully realized Avatar who understands and can sympathize with all the people of the world, not just but those who share his beliefs and upbringings, can sustain peace and balance in the world. The point of the Avatar Institution is to give the world an impartial judge who understands and appreciates cultural differences between people. If the Avatar is clueless and insensitive toward these differences, as I believe Aang is, his judgments will be seen as unjust, and he cannot make the world a better place if people don't think he understands their concerns. This was something the Avatar needed to know, but probably didn't. Hopefully the Water Tribe siblings would pass the message along. It is dangerous for any Avatar to adapt an active role in world politics, especially at such an early stage in their training. Because of his title, people will follow his lead, but Aang is not yet qualified to make decisions for the world, and I fear he will lead his followers hastily and end up being more of a threat than an asset even to those he means to help. According to Aang's own words, he wants nothing more than bring peace and balance back to the world, and I believe the young man is sincere in this. However, Aang's actions indicate that he is not only willing but eager to take part in the fighting. He's been hostile toward almost all Fire Nation people he's met, which in part has led the people of Fire to see him as something less than a potential negotiator, or people do not recognize Aang as the rightful Avatar. However, in my opinion, what is more dangerous than Aang's conscious war efforts are the things he's done by accident. The Avatar is very powerful, and Aang is using that power carelessly. Uncle sighed. There was a time when Zuko took a serious look at his task of capturing the Avatar, weighing whether it was important as our nation has traditionally considered it to be. In a less familiar company, I wouldn't have dared to tell military men that the commanding officer was questioning his orders. But in this company, he saw no harm in it. Soldiers weren't supposed to think for themselves, but Zuko's crew did not consist of the most upright soldiers to begin with. Everyone in the crew, however, one way or another, screwed up or fallen out of grace before it had been put on this assignment. If they had questioned the meaningfulness of their orders before, they had learned to question it during the last 3 years on the sea chasing Ghost. Zuko's crew wouldn't just be understanding toward his nephew's doubts. They would probably be relieved to hear that Zuko wasn't acting on blind faith, but occasionally stopped to consider if the fight was still worth fighting. There might be a better way to ensure that the Avatar doesn't hurt our people than hunting the air nomad down. After all, the young Avatar hasn't been excessively violent toward our nation, but he seems to fight only in self-defense. I was happy to see that many of the soldiers nodded in agreement. However, any chance of Zuko trying to come up with a peaceful solution was lost away when he learned of what the Avatar had done to a small Fire Nation colony. The Avatar was manipulated into participating in a plan to blow up a dam to cause a flood wave that would have killed everyone in the colony. Due to a stroke of luck, although the dam was destroyed, no one was seriously injured. If there had been a loss of life, though, I'm sure Zuko wouldn't have forgiven himself. After that day, capturing the Avatar had once again been Zuko's first priority, because even if Aang means well, his carefree attitude and trusting nature makes him a danger to our people and the world. Aang hasn't caused a catastrophic, resulting in significant loss of life yet. But so long as he doesn't stop to consider the consequences of his actions, I fear it is only a matter of time. The last part was directed to the Water Tribe kids eavesdropping on the conversation. I could only pray that they were ready to hear this, and would consider doing things differently from now on. Katara and Sokka did, after all, have more influence on the Avatar than perhaps anyone else in the world. I was being harsh on the Avatar, harsher than was strictly necessary. Personally, Uncle was more worried about the things his own nation was doing. The Avatar at least meant well, which was more than what I could say for Ozai. As long as the Avatar had no ill will against anyone, the world was relatively safe from him. More safe than had been during the reign of some past Avatars, even. Despite over a decade of training, most Avatars never learned to truly appreciate other elements and peoples. Aang may be ignorant, but ignorance is a flaw more easily fixed than an attitude problem. All this standing around wasn't good for Zuko. The dragon had to blink several times to keep his vision clear and his senses keen. If something didn't happen soon, he might have to lie down. Even when injured or ill, Zuko had kept going as long as he had a clear target in mind. Now he was standing outside the fortune teller's house, waiting for Aang to come back and tell him the news, and the uncertainty was starting to get to him. And here's the dragon I told you about, the one that brought me all this way to show me the volcano is active. Aang emerged from the house, dragging with him an elderly, well-dressed woman. The fortune teller, Zuko guessed. The one person in this town we really have to convince of the danger. Well? Aang sounded frustrated. It was nice to see the Aero Nomad for once taking things seriously, but his frustration was probably a bad sign. Now do you believe me? The gray-haired woman looked at the sky and said, I understand your concern, but you can see there are no omens of death in the clouds. Seeing a black dragon is a bad omen, but seeing a dragon near a volcano is a good omen. So they balance each other out. We should be quite safe. Zuko's eyes narrowed. He could feel irritation growing within him. That was good. Anger might cloud his judgment, but it gave him strength to keep going, and that was what Zuko needed right now. There was only one person in the village who needed convincing in order to save them all, and she wouldn't be swayed by words. She only believed what she saw with her own two eyes. That could be arranged. The dragon's eyes narrowed ominously. The animal rushed forward and grabbed Aunt Wu in his front paws and rose to the air. All Aang had time to do was gape. Avatar Aang! Your dragon just kidnapped Aunt Wu! The fortune teller's adorable little assistant shouted, sounding more amazed than worried. Aang smiled apologetically and rubbed the back of his head. It's not actually my dragon. Sokka tapped Katara on the shoulder to get her attention. She startled a bit and turned to look at him, looking as puzzled as Sokka felt. Most of the things Ira had said were news to Sokka. Surely a good chunk of it was lies and Fire Nation propaganda, but even just a fraction of what they had heard was true? Sokka would have to spend more time analyzing Ira's claims about Aang, the past avatars, and Prince Zuko to make some sense of it all. But right now they needed to keep going. Katara looked one more time down at the soldiers before turning to Sokka and nodding. Sokka crawled the rest of the way to the door, and careful as not to make a sound, Sokka opened it. wasn't locked, nor did it squeak, and there wasn't anyone in the corridor behind it. Sokka sighed in relief, looking like Lady Luck was on their side today. After they closed the door behind them, Sokka turned to talk to Katara. But his sister beat him to it. Looking worried, Katara asked, "He was lying, right?" "Probably," Sokka allowed. "We'll have to think about it later. Right now, we need to find a way off this ship without causing alarm, if possible." Katara nodded, her confusion changing back to determination. "I have Momo, but do you think Appa is somewhere here as well, or Aang?" "Good question. It wouldn't be right if they accidentally left any team members behind." Sokka shook his head. "I seriously doubt it. Appa's too big to be dragged here, and if Aang was here, the ship would be on its way to Fire Nation by now." Katara nodded. "Which way should we go?" Sokka lifted his hand to his chin, looking thoughtful. "I don't know much about Fire Nation ships, but we have been on this particular one before." "Only on the deck, and you don't have any idea how to get there, do you?" Katara guessed. "We can use logic to get us out of here. Taking into account the ship's size and mass," Katara turned and started walking. They had barely rounded the first corner when Katara grabbed Sokka by the sleeve and pointed ahead of them. There was something in the corridor. It wasn't big enough to be a person, but that didn't mean it couldn't be something alive. Who knew what kind of awful things lurked on these ships? Momo wriggled out of Katara's embrace and flew straight for the pile of something ahead of them. The lemur dug through and lifted a piece of fruit from the pile. "Sokka," Katara whispered, sounding happy. "It's not an enemy. It's our stuff." Sokka looked again. His sister was right. The weapons and bags and overcoats were in a pile in the middle of the corridor. Atop the pile was a stack of dried fruit, which one was stuffing into his mouth. Weird. We didn't have any dried fruit with us. Sokka thought briefly, but dismissed the thought. It was probably nothing important. Both children quickly gathered their things, while Sokka was still going over his backpack, making sure nothing was missing. Katara suddenly blurted, "Look!" Sokka turned to look, expecting an assault, but there was no one behind him. "It's Aang's staff!" Sokka blinked. Twice. Again, his sister was right. A few meters away there was an open door. Inside the room was Aang's wooden staff. Sokka sighed. "Sis, you only say look like that if there's a Fire Nation guy about to attack us." Katara walked into the room and grabbed the staff. "If there was a Fire Nation guy about to attack us, I wouldn't shout, 'Look,' I would waterbend at him." Sokka rolled his eyes, but then asked, "You have water with you?" Katara opened her waterskin cork and shook her head. "No." "Well, I got my boomerang. Let's try not to raise an alarm." Whenever they saw a staircase leading up, they took it. They were inside the ship's hull, so up was the only way to go. Soon Sokka could see the natural light ahead of them. This has to be a way to the deck. The Water Tribe siblings made their way to the door that had been left ajar and peeked to see if there were any guards on deck. There were none. "Huh." Sokka frowned. Katara lifted her eyebrows at him. "Doesn't this seem a bit too easy to you?" Sokka asked. Everyone knew the Fire Nation soldiers are easy to fool. Well, they were at least how they were portrayed in Water Tribe stories told around campfires. Still, Sokka couldn't shake off the feeling that he was missing something. "Let's just go." Katara hurried her brother. "Even if something's going on, it won't be our problem for much longer." "What gives?" It was Sokka's turn to look curious. Katara lifted a small wooden object to her hand. It was the bison whistle. "You can't be serious." Sokka rolled his eyes. "That thing doesn't work. And even if it did, we have no guarantee Appa will be within hearing range." Ignoring her brother, Katara blew the whistle, which made no sound at all. Sokka couldn't believe that their escape plan hinged on a broken decorative item. He looked around the deck, trying to think of a better plan. There looked to be a ramp leading from the deck to the docks. But again, Sokka had a nagging feeling it wouldn't be that simple. "Look!" Katara, clearly having ignored her brother's earlier wishes regarding the use of that particular word, shouted. Sokka couldn't believe his eyes. Appa was flying straight for them. The gigantic bison landed atop the ship's deck, much like it had done the previous time they had been aboard Zuko's ship. A few Fire Nation soldiers had finally noticed something was going on. Sokka could see them running from the observation deck. Katara and Sokka ran over to Appa and climbed atop the bison. Before any of the soldiers had time to stop them, Appa was up and away. "Appa, we're so happy to see you!" Katara hugged the bison's head. That was amazing! Sokka congratulated the animal. They were flying inland, so the Fire Nation ship wouldn't be able to follow them. We made it. Katara was going through the stuff to make sure they didn't drop anything in either hurry. She stopped to weigh Aang's air staff in her hands. Funny, she whispered, that we found the staff. I mean, Aang was sure it had been destroyed. Aang is in the habit of jumping to conclusions, Sokka said and shrugged. Maybe he didn't see the staff get destroyed, but presumed the worst? Aang, presuming the worst? Katara said skeptically. That'll be the day. Sokka tried to think of a witty response, but then he saw the worried look in his sister's eyes and instead said, Aang is fine, you know? We don't know that. Katara answered. I have a feeling he is, Sokka comforted. And as soon as we know for a fact, because considering the awesome luck we seem to be having today, we're sure to run into him soon. Katara smiled weakly at him. I hope you're right. Hear me, my friends. There is bad omens indicating that Mount Mokpu might be about to erupt. Aunt Wu still looked a little bit dazed, her hair pointing in wild directions as she addressed the townfolk gathered in the main square. Many of the citizens gaped and sighed in surprise and worry. Aang and Zuko exchanged a look. Fine, Aang admitted, crossing his arms. Taking Aunt Wu to see the crater was a good idea, but next time could you be a bit more polite about it? Or at least give me the heads up? Kidnapping people won't solve all your problems. Zuko snickered. He couldn't help it. The irony of the Avatar giving him a lecture on good manners and not kidnapping people wasn't lost on him. What should we do to prevent the catastrophe? One of the villagers asked Aunt Wu. While the fortune teller was struggling to find the right words, Aang jumped next to her and spoke. Hi, some of you might already know this, but I'm the Avatar, Avatar Aang. I'm here to help you. Now everyone's eyes were on Aang. You have to evacuate immediately. But what about our homes? Now that we have been foretold of the disaster, there must be some way to save our village, someone from the crowd shouted. Aang looked uneasy. Well, if someone has an idea on how to do that, I'm open to suggestions. Zuko was no longer listening to the Avatar. It was hard to focus on anything other than the chilling feeling that passed him, as if someone had walked over his memorial shrine. Zuko turned to look at the volcano. It was going to erupt soon. There was a loud rumbling sound, and the earth beneath Aang shook a bit. Aang looked around himself even though he could really guess what was causing the earthquake. A thick cloud of black smoke rose from Mount Mokpu. The volcano was erupting. There wouldn't be time to evacuate the village now, Aang realized. Not unless I do something to slow down the lava currents. Even though it was bigger and more menacing than anything Aang had fought in the past, Aang knew he had to fight the volcano. If he could buy the villagers a bit more time to get to safety, he had to do it. Everyone, stay calm, Aang shouted over the panicking crowd. Everything's going to be okay. Aang couldn't really see how exactly that was going to be okay, but he had to say something. Panic wouldn't help. Suddenly, the dragon was next to Aang, extending his whisker to him the same way Roku's dragon had. The whisker touched Aang's forehead. First thing he thought, nothing was going to happen. Then Aang saw the briefest glimpse of different scenes, different memories. The vision was too erratic for Aang to get a coherent picture of it. The dragon snarled under his breath, but before Aang had time to ask what was wrong, the vision cleared. Aang saw an image of a little girl dressed in green. Then the vision shifted a bit, and Aang recognized the place the dragon was showing him. In the vision, the earth caved out of the way, creating a massive trench that guided the floodwater past the village. The connection broke, and Aang was back in the fortune-teller's village. He turned to look at the dragon, who was still looking at him. Aang nodded at the dragon. He understood what it wanted him to do. But I don't know any earthbending, Aang confessed. The dragon gestured toward the villagers. Right, Aang realized and turned to address the village. Could anyone here who is an earthbender lift their hand? A considerable number of hands rose. Good. Here's what we're going to do. What's that? Sokka asked. Katara turned to look. A mountain not far from them had burst out a massive black cloud. A volcano, Katara recognized. They had seen one like that in the Fire Nation when Avatar Roku tore the temple apart. The smoke was spreading quickly. It looked beautiful, at the same time dangerous. What if there are people down there? Katara asked. Sokka pulled at Appa's reins. If there are people stuck there, we gotta go help. A flying bison could be their only way to safety. Sokka sounded very serious, like all his usual humor gone. Katara nodded. Finding Aang would have to wait. Appa flew bravely close to the erupting volcano. He swooped down in order to fly under the thick cloud of smoke. Sokka focused on guiding the air bison, so Katara concentrated on looking to see if there was any people below. Look! A village! Katara noticed. She felt a lump firmly in her throat. There was a whole village at the foot of the volcano. There were too many people to fit on Appa. Look! Sokka commented back. Look at what they're doing! Katara looked again, but this time to see a group of earthbenders laying a wall roughly the height of 2-story buildings. Everywhere they looked, there was people either earthbending or shoveling the earth, creating trenches and walls around the village. They're going to guide the lava away, Sokka said, sounding impressed. Let's go see if we can help, Katara said. Sokka nodded and began guiding Appa down. Suddenly, Katara saw something orange flash past her peripheral vision. She turned to look and could barely believe her eyes. Aang! Katara called out to their friend. Sokka, too, turned to look. Aang was some distance up the volcano's side, but there was no mistaking the orange-clad boy. The airbender had his back to the village and hadn't even heard Katara's cry. Instead, Aang jumped into the air and did an airbending kata, forming a massive gust of wind to cool down the currents of lava heading for the village. The struggle between an avatar and a force of nature was terrifying to look at, merely because the force was so unbalanced. There was no way Aang could win. Something moved past Aang. A dragon, the color of volcanic smoke, flew dangerously close to the lava and breathed a wave of fire on the rocks. It was trying to push the lava out of the way, but it wasn't as effective as Aang. The dragon turned to 180 in a flash of black scales and flew back to Aang again. It flapped its wings hard, probably trying to create a cooling wind. Despite Aang's effort, the lava in front of him was steadily approaching the air nomad, already dangerously close. At the last minute, Aang jumped into the air and somersaulted onto the dragon's back. Together, the two kept fighting the volcano. Sokka, we have to go help Aang now. Katara turned to look at her brother. Sokka shook his head. Aang's got the situation under control. There's nothing you and I can do against the volcano, so we should head for the village. We'll be more use there. Aang needs us, Katara pleaded. She couldn't take her eyes off the battle raging on the volcano's slope. The dragon shot a stream of fire into the lava, causing it to explode up before the column of molten rock had time to fall. Aang cooled it with airbending. Their teamwork had helped create a wall that divided the lava and redirected it toward the trenches rather than the village. He's doing fine, Katara numbly realized. He's the Avatar, and he knows what he's doing, and he isn't alone. Ignoring his sister's wishes, Sokka landed the bison in the village, a safe distance from the lava, but close enough to the trenches for it to be easy to get to the earthbenders. Appa complained. Sokka jumped down to pat the bison's neck soothingly. On the ground, the air was hotter than it had been in the air. The land had warmed under Katara's soft leather boots. A woman in her 30s ran over to meet them. Who are you? I'm Sokka, Sokka shouted in order to be heard over the chaos. This is my sister Katara. We're friends with the Avatar, and we're here to help. Is there anything we can do? Are you earthbenders? The woman asked. We're a water tribe. My sister's a waterbender, Sokka answered. The woman nodded. You can help dig, if you want to, though there's not much left to do. The lava will have all but passed the village, thanks to your airbending friend and his dragon. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Aang was suddenly there, riding a dragon, shouting, Katara! Sokka! The air nomad landed gracefully between the water tribe siblings. He hugged them both. I was so worried for you. You were worried for us? Katara managed. The waterbender pulled Aang a bit closer. My sis has a point. We weren't the ones riding a dragon and fighting a volcano, Sokka felt compelled to point out. Appa licked Aang with its enormous tongue, causing the boy to giggle. Appa! Aang hugged Appa, and the bison seemed happy, but soon began to growl restlessly. The dragon had landed not too far from them. It's okay, Aang told his friend. He's a friendly dragon. He rescued me from the Fire Nation and brought me here to save this village. The Fire Nation? Katara was shocked. How many dangers have you encountered while looking for medicine? Let me guess, Sokka put in. Prince Zuko tried to capture you. He was there too, Aang said sincerely. But it was the archers that Zhao guy had sent after me that I needed saving from. Thankfully, a masked man called the Blue Spirit came to my rescue, and then the dragon flew me out of there. Wow, Sokka huffed. That makes us getting kidnapped by General Iroh sound pretty dull. Katara wasn't quite as quick to share the boy's excitement. Aang, you could have gotten seriously hurt. I know, Aang said. But it's not like I planned for this to happen. Plus, I wasn't in that much danger. The Fire Nation wants to capture me alive. And I tried to get back to you as soon as I could. I really did. Katara smiled at him, but before she had time to say anything, the dragon standing some distance from them collapsed. Zuko was no quitter, but right now he saw no pressing reason to keep fighting his nausea, so he allowed himself to fall to the ground. The village was safe. Zuko was surrounded by enemies, but he wasn't in life-threatening danger for them. Most importantly, though, he didn't have to keep fighting to stay alert to capture the Avatar, because he wouldn't. This completes my betrayal, Zuko thought solemnly. A doubt had been nagging him ever since he had seen the way the air nomad had approached the danger-threatening village. Without a moment's hesitation, Aang had been willing to risk his life to keep this ungrateful lot alive. Zuko had read everything he could get his hands on about every Avatar known to history in preparation for his quest, but he knew how dangerous Aang could be. Still, the Avatar wasn't just dangerous. Most stories depict the Avatar as some powerful and important, but also someone who did great deeds. So far, Zuko had only been looking at the catastrophes and disasters Aang had caused or might cause in the future, the worst-case scenarios. Now he could see of the good the Avatar might do for the world. These people would have died if Aang hadn't shown up here. If I had succeeded in capturing the Avatar my first day back at the South Pole, a lot of people might be dead as a result, because the Avatar wouldn't have been there to save them. The Avatar was capable of both great good and great evil. Zuko's decision boiled down to which way the scales were likely to tip. This isn't just about the Fire Nation, it's about the world. During the storm, Uncle had told Zuko that they needed to consider the actions and the consequences that might hold on a larger scale than before, thinking about the big picture. And the more Zuko did, the less sure he was of his plan to capture Aang. Capturing the Avatar was the only way to ensure the boy wouldn't do anything awful, but it would also ensure he couldn't do anything good either. The Avatar wouldn't be able to stop natural disasters, rampaging spirits, or other things no one else had the power to stop. Aang had done some pretty bad stuff. A certain dam came to mind, but even then he hadn't intended it for it to happen. Good intentions. That's what had meant next to nothing to Zuko in the past. But suddenly the word held meaning. Intentions matter. The Avatar had been gone from the world for over 100 years, and in his absence, the world had went to hell. Maybe he didn't have much to lose by giving the Avatar a try now. Zuko could try to communicate with the Avatar, to tell him that if the boy behaved and did only good things from now on, he'd no longer have to worry about Prince Zuko getting in his way. But the words sounded silly and naive even in Zuko's mind. No one knows the future, and we can only hope for the best. Optimism wasn't Zuko's strong suit, but you have to try everything once. The one connection Zuko had been able to establish with the Avatar had taken a lot of focus and effort, so Zuko doubted he would even be able to communicate with the monk in his current state. It didn't really matter right now what Zuko could and could not communicate. Even if Zuko could capture the Avatar, frankly, he wouldn't be able to pull it off. Not now, when he had to fight the Bison as well. Whatever decision Zuko made right now wouldn't matter, so he made the decision that he wanted to do with the Avatar later. Then again, postponing the Avatar wasn't like the prince. He was a more face your problems head-on kind of guy. If Zuko was being honest with himself, had made his choice. He chose not to capture the Avatar. Buddy, you okay? The Avatar came closer, sounding worried. He might be injured. He was a bit like this earlier, but I thought he got better. The last statement was meant for his friends. From the corner of his eye, Zuko could see the water-type girl nodding, and then walking toward him with a determined look on her face. She was holding something in her hands. It was a glove of water? Zuko didn't get up, but he turned to face the girl and growled at her. That stopped Katara dead in her tracks. No, Aang said and stepped between them. It's okay. Katara's my friend, and she's going to help you. She's a waterbender. She can heal. It took a long while before the words sank in. Waterbender. And that was supposed to be reassuring? The Avatar had a point, so Zuko gave the offer some thought, but ultimately decided against accepting their help. She wouldn't offer to help me if she knew who I really am. That did it for Zuko. It reminded him that he wasn't among friends. These people wouldn't be so kind if they knew he was Prince Zuko. He gave himself up, startling all three children. He drew strength from his inner fire, preparing to take flight. Zuko had a destination again, and the Avatar's bison smell would lead him there, to Uncle. Zuko rose in the air. His flight wasn't steady, but the main point was that he was on his way again. On his way home. I don't get it, Aang said as the children watched the dragon fly away. He was nice earlier. Sokka put his hands on Aang's shoulder. It's not your fault, Aang. My guess is your friend is a wild dragon, and not as easily tamed as Momo was. Maybe, the airbender allowed. I just hope he's going to be okay. I'm sure he will be, Katara assured him. He was well enough to fly, so I'm sure he's well enough to fend for himself. Aang still looked upset. Sokka tried to think of something to say to cheer him up. Sokka looked at Appa and had a simple idea to come to him. He walked over the bison, climbed into the saddle, and lifted something over his head. Look what we found! My ear staff! Aang jumped up and down before taking the staff Sokka was handing him. But how's that possible? I thought Prince Zuko destroyed it. Turns out he didn't, Sokka replied, smiling. Great! I wonder why he lied about it, though. Aang frowned a bit. Sokka sighed. Turns out Prince Zuko is a much more complicated person than we would ever give him credit for, so I'm not going to even try to guess why he lied about the staff. Aang turned to Katara for an explanation. It's a long story. The Water Tribe girl sighed as well. We'll tell you about it later. The Water Tribe siblings' escape had been more eventful than even Iroh had anticipated. Even the Avatar's bison had made a guest appearance. Uncle had no idea how Appa had managed to track them. Perhaps they had followed Iroh. Sokka and Katara sent to the shore, and then searched the coastline at random. He would probably never know for sure. Still, he had to give one thing to the air bison. It had impeccable timing. The crew had noticed the flashy escape as well, and had taken Iroh some time to convince them that Prince Zuko wouldn't be mad at them for letting the prisoners get away. After the matter was settled, Iroh made sure their ship was fully stocked and ready to go the moment his nephew came back. Iroh had ran out of things to do to keep his mind busy, leaving him with nothing to distract him from his worry. Several crew members had asked if they could help, and Iroh had decided he wasn't going to sit around waiting for Zuko to come back. Not this time. It was a rational decision. Iroh had no idea what direction Zuko would approach them from. Even so, half the crew was helping him search the port and their surrounding forest for any sign of the wayward prince. Zuko should have been able to get to their rendezvous point by now. Something must have gone wrong. A part of Iroh wanted to sail back to Baiho's stronghold, not caring how suspicious it would look. Iroh was more than ready to take on an entire fortress if need be. But he knew that would not be wise. Zuko was only a few hours late. Uncle shouldn't jump to the gun just yet. He needed to give Zuko more time. He needed to have faith in his nephew. For the time being, all Uncle could do was search the nearby forest. So that's what he was doing. Iroh had left Lieutenant G in charge of the ship while he and 2 crew members trekked up the cliffside, following the coastline. They had gone far enough now, and Iroh knew the reasonable thing to do would be head back to ship. I need to find Zuko, but this isn't the way. Look! Seaman Lee suddenly said, and pointed to the sky. What's that? Iroh turned to look, and was relieved beyond words to recognize a familiar silhouette slithering through the air. Zuko was heading a bit north from their position, probably toward the ship. A Fire Nation-friendly port is no place for a dragon, Iroh realized, and decided he should call Zuko's attention to him. Uncle took a firebending stance and shot a large fire fist directly above him. A column of fire rose high into the sky. Uncle was pleased to notice Zuko changed his direction and started heading toward them. Sir, I think it's coming here, Seaman Juva warned him. Right. I should have a word with the crew members about what they were about to encounter. Yes, I believe it is. But that is perfectly fine. I have everything under control. Seaman Lee and Juva looked less than convinced, but they nodded. Iroh felt it necessary to give them a bit more information. I have experience dealing with dragons. Leave this to me. When Zuko got closer, Iroh knew something was amiss. Though the dragon was moving at impressive speed, his movements were erratic. He was flying so low he was brushing the treetops, occasionally hitting a branch or two, and still, Zuko didn't rise higher or slow down. Yes, there was definitely something wrong with his nephew. Zuko was upon him. He half landed, half fell next to them. The ungrateful entrance caused Lee and Jova to take a couple steps back. Iroh, on the contrary, hurried over to his nephew. Zuko got back to his feet, though barely. Iroh noticed he wasn't putting much weight on the left front paw. Zuko snarled, which caught Iroh by surprise. "What's wrong?" Iroh asked. "What do you need me to do?" There wasn't much Iroh could do to help Zuko while the boy was still a dragon. Unfortunately, he wasn't sure what set Zuko's transformation into motion. Iroh had some working theories, like that the trigger appeared to be emotional rather than physical, but on a moment such as this, theories felt feeble at best. Iroh knew Zuko was in pain and needed him, but he didn't know how to help. Zuko's body swayed a bit, and the dragon shook his head, trying to clear it. Seaman Lee took a step toward Iroh. "You all right, sir?" The movement caused Zuko to hiss at them, flashing teeth. "Nephew!" Iroh shouted. "Where are your manners?" Zuko froze in place. Uncle hated shouting at Zuko, but he needed his nephew to snap out of it, and confusing the boy seemed to be the fastest way. "Your hard-working crew is here to help. They deserve better than this," Iroh stated in a stern, disapproving voice. For a moment, Iroh could see in Zuko's eyes how lost the boy felt. Iroh felt remorse for his harsh words, but before he had time to say anything, a multicolored flame lit the clearing around the cliff. Zuko lost his balance and started to fall, but Iroh had been expecting this. Ignoring the warm but not hot flames, he caught the boy in his arms before Zuko would fall to the ground. Iroh eased Zuko down, getting down on his knees and holding Zuko's head in his lap. The boy had a high fever. Zuko was very conscious, but he managed to say, "Uncle, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." "Shush, it's all right." Iroh comforted his nephew. "I'm not angry with you. You did well, and now you need to rest." "I let the Avatar go." Zuko's words were barely above a whisper then. "It's all right," Iroh repeated. Some of the tension and worry in Zuko's face lessened, and he fell into a restless sleep. Iroh held his nephew in his arms. The boy looked so young and fragile. "Sir?" Seaman Juva asked. Iroh sighed. "Gin is out of the bottle now." "Sir?" Seaman Juva repeated with more confidence. "What are your orders, sir?" "We should get Zuko back to the ship," Iroh said. Yes, sir," Seaman Lee answered, having found his voice again.